This is a prayer plant that we got a few weeks ago, and it's sitting on our shelf for a while. We haven't really done too much to care for it, but I thought I'd do a little bit of research to see how we're actually supposed to care for this thing, what are the best conditions it's supposed to grow in, and what else am I supposed to do to best take care of this plant. So this is what our prayer plant looks like. There's some holes on it because our cats kind of chewed on it a little bit when we just set it down on a table for a few seconds. I made another video about that a few weeks ago that kind of explains the whole cat situation, but I think we have that pretty much under control. So this is what our plant looks like. The Latin name for prayer plants, it's called a Maranta. I'm sure words will flash up on the screen showing you how to spell that. But the common name for these, like I just said, these are called prayer plants. That's what I'm sure most people will call these type of plants. And the reason they're called prayer plants is the leaves are supposed to be kind of flat during the day, but at nighttime or maybe around the evening time, the leaves will actually start to fold up, kind of like, I guess somehow like your hands are going up in prayer. So that's the story of how these became called the prayer plant. I haven't really noticed it personally. Maybe it's a thing, but I haven't really paid too much attention to see if that's actually a thing that happens with this plant. So the one that I have, it's a tricolor variety. And the reason it's called a tricolor variety is I guess there's 3 colors that are on the plant leaves. So there's like a dark green color, and then there's also kind of some red veiny colors that show up on these leaves. It's kind of hard to see on video, but I think in person the red really stands out. And I guess there's also a bit of yellow. Kind of see it on this leaf. There's like little spots of yellow on here. So this is a tricolor variety. There's a couple of other varieties that are very common. This one's also very common. I'll just pop them up on screen. I don't want to butcher their Latin names in case you want to research those. But I'm sure if you've walked into any gardening store, any plant nursery, you've definitely seen these plants around because these are actually super common. I think the store that we went to when we got these, we saw a whole bunch of them like all over the front of the store where the plant shelves were. So these are really easy to find and get one of your own. I also kind of like that the colors are pretty unique. I don't think too many plants have kind of this red color, this red veiny color. So that's kind of another thing that I like about this plant. Just the overall aesthetic looks pretty interesting. And I'll just show you the backside. I think on video it doesn't come out very well, but the backside is actually, well, maybe at this angle you can kind of see it. Underside of these leaves are actually red, and so that's kind of also pretty interesting, I think. So prayer plants are actually pretty slow growing. I've heard that they can only grow up to about a foot tall, but they don't really grow all that big. So it's kind of nice if you're looking for a plant that doesn't take up too much space and you won't have to move it around because it's growing too big. It'll stay pretty much the same size, but you can always propagate the leaves when you want to repot it to, I guess, get more prayer plant leaves growing in one of your pots. One of the reasons that we got this plant is actually because it's cat friendly. So this is one of the cat friendly plants that we saw come up online. And since we got a couple of cats in our house, we thought it would be a great idea to get one of these. And luckily for us, that kind of worked out because as you can see, the cats actually started chewing on it right away. So it's a great plant to have if you have pets in your house or even small kids who happen to like eating plants. So in terms of the lighting conditions, prayer plants will prefer to grow in kind of shady areas. They don't like to be exposed to direct sunlight because that can actually burn the leaves and cause them to lose their color and also to get these yellow splotches on them. I'm not sure if this leaf has been exposed to direct sunlight in particular, but this might be something that you might see in a leaf that has been exposed to direct sunlight. You can kind of see the colors are really faded here, and it overall just looks very yellow, pale, and the tips are kind of a little bit brown. You can kind of see that there. That could also be due to overwatering or even underwatering. That's something that you might see happen if the watering isn't right. And speaking of water, you're probably going to want to water this pretty often because you don't want the soil to dry out. You want to keep it consistently moist in well-draining soil. So I would say you probably want to water this once every 1 or 2 weeks, but it depends on a lot of factors. So one way to tell for sure is you just want to stick your finger in the soil and just see if it feels very dry. If it feels dry at all, that's definitely a sign that it's time to water this plant. If you're someone who cares about soil acidity, me personally, I don't pay too much attention to that, but prayer plants will prefer to have soil that is around neutral, maybe slightly acidic. Those are the best conditions for the soil. One thing that I found out when doing research is that apparently prayer plants can actually flower, and the flower is it's just a white flower, but it's probably not gonna be something that happens with your prayer plant if you're keeping it indoors. I think that happens only to prayer plants that are kept outdoors. For us, most prayer plants will actually prefer to live in hardiness zones of 11 and 12. For us, we live in Seattle, which is a hardiness zone about 8 or 8B, so it's a little bit too cold for these plants to set them outdoors. For temperatures, you want to keep them in the range of 60 to 80 degrees, so roughly around room temperature. Otherwise, this plant's probably not going to do too well. Another piece that you want to think about with prayer plants is you probably want to give them a lot more humidity than some of the other plants. There's a couple of ways you can do that. I think I made another video about that I'll link in the description below if you want to check that out, about how to increase humidity for your plants. But one thing you can do is you can just fill a dish of water, set it over that, maybe set some stones in there so it can stand up, just so that water can evaporate and increase the humidity around your plant. Or you could also grow these inside of a terrarium or a greenhouse if you happen to have one of those. Those are great ways you can keep the humidity levels up for your prayer plant. So if you want your prayer plant to grow bigger, fertilizer is something that you can try out. So if your plant is in a growing season, I think that happens around the springtime, then you can apply some fertilizer, add some fertilizer to the soil once every 2 weeks. Always make sure to follow the instructions. I also made another video about that one, about how to use fertilizer, if you want to check that one out, just so you know when and how you're supposed to use fertilizer for your plant. If you want your plant to grow bigger, fertilizer is an option for you. But that's pretty much it in terms of how you're supposed to care for this plant. It's a pretty easy plant to take care of, as long as you keep the humidity up, water it frequently, make sure the soil doesn't dry out, and you put it in shady, indirect sunlight. But that's pretty much it for this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. Bye.